G'day people. Today I'm going to make another one of my staple foods. And this one is shortbread. And for those who don't know, shortbread is a famous Scottish biscuit. I guess other people do it, but no one does it like the Scots. So you might argue that to make authentic shortbread you need to be Scottish. And although I'm not technically Scottish, I do have Scottish ancestry. My great-great-grandmother came out to Australia in the gold rush, and she was from Dundonald in Ayrshire in Scotland. And I am her mitochondrial ancestor. She's direct matrilineal ancestor of my mother, so my mitochondria comes from Scotland. Interesting. All right. And although my mother herself didn't make shortbread, but her mother certainly did. The granddaughter of my great-great-grandmother. She certainly did, and I really liked it. When I was a kid, we used to go around to my grandmother's house, and she would always pull out her jar of shortbread, her tin of shortbread. And in fact, this is the companion jar to the one that had the shortbread in it. This one had something else in it. The shortbread one had a cyan top, but exactly the same. So the jar that I keep the shortbread in dates back to my grandmother. Anyway, she used to make shortbread, and her shortbread was unique. I've never seen any other shortbread like it. She cooked hers at a fairly low temperature, I think for a long time, and it had a specific quality about it. She used to put a half an almond at the top of each slice. Very Scottish, and I loved it. I don't think the other people in my family, my siblings, weren't so keen on it, but I really liked it. And then the time came for me to just make shortbread, and I never even asked my grandmother how to make it. I just looked it up on the net. But I found that I was just able to do it. And people who ate my shortbread always said that it was the best. And my shortbread's not the same as my grandmother's, and probably not the same as her mother or her mother. Mine's more golden and buttery and crisp than my grandmother's. A different flavour, but my granny's shortbread was just terrific. Anyway, so shortbread is very, very simple. And like all of the things I'm doing at the start of my cooking channel, they're all really simple, but you have to get them right. This is a trick. Simple cookery is hard cookery because there's no room for a mistake. Everything has to be perfect or won't be any good. And this is certainly true for shortbread. And the critical things when it comes to shortbread is temperature. It's temperature, temperature, and temperature. And the first temperature that's critical is the butter. Now, when you make shortbreads, like making pastry, like making short crust pastry, temperature of the butter is everything. If the butter's too hot, the pastry will not come together. It won't stick. You won't be able to hold anything together with it. And if it's too cold, it won't come together, or it'll be too hard to and crack. You've got to be just right temperature. It's not quite so critical for shortbread. You can get away with making shortbread with the butter's not the right temperature, but it will never taste right. It will never be right. The texture just won't be right. So this is the way I do it. I used to leave it out to room temperature on an ordinary day. But what's an ordinary day? It's got to be exact. The temperature has to be perfect. So probably an ordinary day might be 20 degrees inside, but how often are you going to get exactly 20? If it's 2 degrees less, it won't quite work. If it's 2 degrees more, it won't quite work. So rather than risk it, just take it straight out of the fridge. That way I know what temperature it is. Don't forget to take off the aluminium foil. So I'm going to microwave this with the aluminium foil off. You put the aluminium foil on, surprise, surprise, it won't microwave. and you might blow up your microwave. Anyway, 20 seconds in the mic. Simple recipe. You've got to get it right. Who recognises this thing? It's a K-beater, Kenwood bowl. Right, we get that out of the mic. Put it directly into the bowl. So it'll be soft but not too soft. Certainly won't be runny. You might get a little bit of, little tiny bit of melted butter right in the middle maybe. And that's probably about right. So you see how it sort of squishes a bit, but not too much. That is the temperature you want. Anything else won't work. And it's the same, it's exactly the same temperature as when you're making pastry. Right. Now like you're making short crust pastry, you need to cream the butter and sugar. I don't have to. The Scots used to use the rub-in method. I guess your old Scottish granny used to sit there and rub it in by hand, because of course they didn't have, back in the old days in the 1800s, they didn't have electric beaters like we have now. So, half a cup of caster sugar. Got to be caster sugar. If it's plain sugar, it's a bit too coarse. Got to be caster sugar. And of course, the butter I put in is a cup. 250 grams, a cup of butter. Now we just cream it. Don't want to go too crazy or you'll send sugar flying all over the kitchen. Nice. All creamed. Scrape off the last bit of butter. Right. Is the caster sugar done? Now, this is a classic recipe. It's really simple. The ratio is 1 to 2 to 4. 1 to sugar, 2 butter, 4 flour. So, in my case, it was half a cup of sugar, caster sugar, 1 cup of butter, so 2 cups of flour. And of course, baker's flour. Now, you want to be strict, it'd be level cups, but I think I like it just a little bit more flour. Just a little bit more. Not too heaped, but just a bit heaped. I think Granny might have said at one point she did 2 to 4 to 9. Maybe she said that, I'm not sure. It's in. Better turn the oven on. Now the oven's crucial. Again, temperature. It's all about temperature. Temperature is everything. So, in the old days, I used to cook. The old days when I had a non-fan forced oven, a typical electric oven with an element at the bottom of the oven, so it was hotter at the top, cooler at the bottom, and because there was no air being blown around, the top was shielded from the radiant heat by the bottom, so the top would cook more slowly than the bottom. I'll have more to say about this in a moment, but basically fan force ovens are great for some things and not good for others. And one of the things they're not good for is shortbread. It's just not good. I'll have more to say about it in a minute. But yeah, so I reduced the temperature. Originally I had it cooked at a medium oven, you know, which is 180 degrees. So I reduced to 160. I'll tell you more about it in a minute. I'll just finish mixing the shortbread dough. Now, of course, it's mostly flour, and the butter tries to avoid mixing with the flour. So you need to get in there with a knife and just scrape all the butter off the sides. That's usually all it takes. Should come together now. If it won't come together at all, your butter's too cold. If it comes together too quickly, your butter's too hot. It's just right. Pretty much together, just a bit stuck on the bottom. Now I never had this problem when Kenwood had polyethylene bowls, because the K-beater would actually just barely contact the polyethylene and it would wipe everything off the sides and the bottom. But they won't do that anymore. They won't do that anymore because now they've got stainless steel. Now they've got stainless steel, the K-beater, you can't have an aluminium beater contacting the steel because obviously steel's stronger than aluminium. And you get aluminium in your shortbread, which you don't want. Nobody wants that. So since they moved to stainless steel bowls, the beater doesn't contact the bowl anymore, and you get a thin layer of butter or batter or whatever you've got there that doesn't get scraped off. Anyway, it's easily done. Just get in there with a knife and loosen it yourself, and then it'll just combine with the rest, and Bob's your uncle and Fanny's your aunt. So, that'll do, plain enough. Now we get this off. It's been beaten probably a bit more than it would probably need to be. So probably a little bit softer than ideal. But anyway, that's what happens when it's a warm day, like today's a warm day. Doesn't happen that often in Portland, but today's a warm day in Portland, and just the ambient temperature, just in the space of time it took to beat the dough, is enough to make the dough a bit softer than it would normally be. A little bit softer than it would normally be. Anyway, just use the heel of your hand to try and distribute the dough evenly across the baking tray. Now here's the trick, right? Now I invented this. Well, someone else might have invented it, but I had the idea and I did it myself. Someone may have or may not have done it already, but what happened when I got the fan forced oven is the top would cook too fast. Normally the top, as I was saying, the top didn't cook so fast because it's shielded from the heat underneath by the bottom. But because you've got fan forced, nothing is shielded and everything gets hot, including the top. And And so by the time the top is burning, the bottom wouldn't be hot, wouldn't be properly cooked, because the bottom is protected from direct heat by the baking tray. And it takes a little while for the baking tray to get up hot enough to transmit all the heat through. All of this is critical. Like in the old days, it was just right. So in the old days, I would cook it for 35 minutes. Hang on. In the old days, I'd cook it for 35 minutes at 350 Fahrenheit, 180 Celsius. And it was just worked out right, because by the time the heat penetrated the bottom, the top cooked more slowly, the middle would be just right, and the whole thing was just perfect. We'd get it perfect. I get it perfect most of the time, and everyone that tried it loved it, right? Including me. I'm always eating these things. Although they do contain quite a bit of butter and sugar, so you really don't want to eat too many of them in a hurry. Anyway, so I figured I needed to stop the top from cooking so fast, so I got 2 baking trays and I attached them with a couple of, what do I call those things, split rings, what do I call them? Now this is the famous using of a fork for shortbread, and all Scots will do this. Oh, unless they do it really slow, like my grandmother used to do it really slow with a mould, you know, a thistle. But the usual way is use a fork. Now trust me, this is not an option, the fork, it's necessary. If you don't fork the shortbread, it won't rise properly, it'll be too dense. Now shortbread doesn't rise a lot, but just a little bit, it makes all the difference. So it is critical. The forking does matter. It doesn't take long to do. Anyway, just wondering whether I've given that long enough. I should have started this video with the oven already hot. Anyway, I'll put it in. So I give it about 30 minutes. About 30 minutes. I'll come back when it's done. Okay, time's up. Let's pull it out. Ta-da! Shortbread, people. That is shortbread. Yeah, very simple. You got to cut it. You got to cut it while it's hot. Straight out of the oven, it's time to cut it. If you wait till it's cold, it won't cut properly. So it just slides through like a knife through hot butter. Right? Now, it's up to you how big you make your biscuits, you know. Whatever you think's a good idea. This is about how big I like them. Yeah, that's about perfect. Alright. All good. Now, don't try to move them at this point. Let them harden up just a little bit. So I'll give them 7 minutes. So they harden up a bit, then we'll turn them over. Okay? Be back in 7 minutes. Okay, 7 minutes have gone past. It's hardened up a little bit, so just turn it over. I'll turn it over nice and easy. As you can see, just nicely cooked on the bottom, and sort of pale gold on the top and a deep gold on the bottom, and that's the way my shortbread is. My grandmother's was quite different because she cooked hers very long and very slow. It was very pale, you know, almost white. But anyway, and yeah, it didn't taste as buttery. This tastes very buttery. But anyway, I won't taste it yet. So you don't want to eat it straight off the tray, in my opinion. It's not best straight off the tray. I mean, you can. It's very tempting to eat it straight off the tray, but let it cool down, you know, good 15 minutes, and then try it. So I'll be back then. Okay, they've now cooled down just about to room temperature. Ideally, probably let them cool down all the way to room temperature. Anyway, let's have a taste. Yeah, they need to be a little bit colder. Also, as they still just a little bit mushy in the middle. I don't know, mushy is not probably the right word, but when they're properly cool, they stabilise in the middle and they get crispy, a bit more crispy, and they just taste the way they should. And they shouldn't be mushy in the middle. A lot of people make a mistake making shortbread and they make it too soft, and it's no good. It's no good. They should be firm. In my case, they're a bit crispy on the outside and firm in the middle, but not too firm. They're easy to bite into, and of course very buttery, which is what you want. If you don't like butter, don't make shortbread. The butter just melts in your mouth. And they're quite light. These ones are quite light. I don't think they can zoom in well enough on this, but if you do zoom in on it, you can see that it's kind of in layers, and the layers are just barely separated, which means that they stay light and yeah, light, but still very buttery. And the sugar's there, you know, there's a taste of sugar, but the sugar's not overwhelming. The sugar is the least amount of stuff. Like, it's half sugar, 1 butter, 2 flour. So sugar's the least. So there's sugar there. You do taste the sugar, but it's not strong. It's not overwhelmingly sugar. It's much more butter. So that's it. That's the famous shortbread. And when they've reached room temperature, store them away. Don't store them away before that point, because they'll keep releasing a bit of steam, and they'll go a bit soggy when you put the lid on. So just let them dry out. By the time they get down to room temperature, they'll be dried out. I mean, it's not like they're releasing a lot of steam. It wouldn't be much, but it doesn't take much, you know, to make them just a little bit soft, which you don't want. You want crispy. So you want to store them as airtight as you can. My grandmother used to store them with greaseproof paper around the top of this jar. Well, the mate to this jar. She used to store greaseproof paper on the top and then put the lid on. I just put the lid on because I'm going to eat them before. And they'll probably go in the next month. They'll all be gone in a month, and that'll be fine. In her case, they used to last for, she used to keep them for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months before she'd make another batch. So she didn't eat as many of them as I do. Anyway, that's it. Shortbread. Simple to make, simple recipe, but you've got to get it right.